However, origin of the species, rapper, freestyler, bust from the war of nature, from the men and death, the most exalted object which we are capable of conceiving, namely the production of the higher animals directly follows. There is grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers having been originally breathed into a few forms or into one, and that whilst this planet gone cycling in according to the fixed law of gravity, a form so simple, beginning endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful have been and are being evolved. There is grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers having taken originally breathed into a few forms or into one, and that whilst this planet has gone cycling and on according to the fixed law of gravity, from so simple a beginning endless forms, the most beautiful and most wonderful have been and are being evolved on one general law leading to advancement of the all organic beings, namely multiply, vary, let the strongest live and the weakest die. Man selects only for his own good, and nature only for that of the being which she stands, which she tends. If it only could be demonstrated that any design, complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down, but I can find no such case. Nothing is easier than to admit in words the truth of the universal struggle for a life, or more difficult, at least I have found it so, than constantly to bear this conclusion of mine. I see no good reason why the views given in this volume should shock the religious views of anyone, for the shield may be as important for victory as the sword of spear. We will now discuss in a little more detail the struggle of existence. Nevertheless, so profound is our ignorance and so high our presumption that we marvel when we hear of the extinction of an organic being, and as we do not see the cause, we invoke cataclysms to desolate the world, and that laws on the duration of the forms of life. I think it inevitably follows that as new species in the course of time are formed through natural selection, others will become rarer and rarer and finally extinct. The forms which stand in closest competition with those undergoing modification and improvement will naturally suffer most, but natural selection as well shall hereafter see its power and incessantly ready for action, and is immeasurably superior to man's feeble efforts as the works of nature are to those of art. To conclude, therefore, let no man out of a weak conceit, a sobriety, or an ill-applied moderation think or maintain that a man can search too far or to be too well studied in the book of God's word, or in the book of God's works, divinity, or philosophy, but rather let men endeavor in endless progress or proficience in both vacant achievement of learning. But a plant on the edge of a desert is said to struggle for life against a drought, though more properly it should be said to be dependent upon the moisture. But just as a proportion as the process of extermination has acted to an enormous scale, so must the number of intermediate varieties which have formerly existed be truly enormous. Why then is it not geological formation in every stratum full of such intermediate links? Geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graduated organic chain, and this perhaps is the most obvious and serious objection which can be urged against the theory. The explanation lies, as I believe, in the extreme imperfection of the geological record, whilst man, however well behaved at best, is but a monkey shaved. The expression often used by Mr. Herbert Spencer of the survival of the fittest is more accurate and is sometimes equally convenient, as many more individuals of which of each species are born that can possibly survive, and as consequently there is a frequently reoccurring struggle for existence. It follows that any being, if a varied, however slightly in any manner profitable to itself under the complex and sometimes sometimes varying conditions, life will have a better chance of surviving and thus be naturally selected. From the strong principle of inheritance, any selected variety will tend to propagate its new and modified form. A natural selection acts by competition and adapts the inhabitants of each country and only in relation to the degree of perfection of their associates, so that we need feel no surprise at the inhabitants of any one country, although on the ordinary view supposed to have been especially created and adapted for that country, being beaten and supplanted by the naturalized productions from another land by man. A grain in the balance will determine which individual shall live and which shall die, which variety or species shall increase in number and which shall decrease or finally become extinct. Indeed, in the distant future, I see open fields for far more important research. Psychology will be based on a new foundation that is the necessary acquirement of each mental power and capacity by gradation. Light will be thrown on the origin of man and his history. I do not believe, as what we shall presently see, that all our dogs have descended from any one wild species, but in the case of some other domestic races, there is presumptive, or even strong evidence in favor of this view. Man could no longer be regarded as a lord of creation, a being apart from the rest of nature. He was merely the representative of one among many families of the order of primates and the class Mammalia. Humans are mammalias. Humans are mammals. The forever origin of the species freestyle.